Hello everybody, it's Vertical Sandwich. Welcome back to book reviews. So today, Second Foundation, the final book in the original trilogy of the Foundation series. Written, my notes say 1953, it might have been 1954, but the books all came out in the early 50s. And warning, there's going to be spoilers for the actual Foundation series. I managed to keep that out of the second review, but the third one I can't. I mean, I just can't. We get far enough in, and I'm going to be spoiling earlier books. So if you haven't read Foundation and Empire, you should. You really should. And then So after years of struggle, the Foundation lies in ruins, destroyed by the mutant mind power of the Mule. But it is rumored that there is a second Foundation hidden somewhere at the end of the galaxy, established to preserve the knowledge of mankind through the long centuries of barbarism. The Mule failed to find it the first time, but now he is certain he knows where it lies. Something, young Arcadia Durrell, only blah blah blah, burdened with a terrible secret. As its scientists gird for a final showdown with the Mule, the survivors of the first Foundation begin their desperate search. They too want the second Foundation destroyed before it destroys them. So you can see that barcode on the back where I couldn't read the description. So yeah. So the Mule is unstoppable, right? I mean, like, the second book does not conclude with the Mule being, defeated. It concludes with him failing to find the second Foundation. Then, but his search continues. So this book directly picks up from the end of the second book, which, by the way, again, if you haven't read the second book in just read them. The Foundation series is so inherently great. It's just so good. Now, that being said, so then what happens is this one is in two parts: one, Search by the Mule, and two, Search by the Foundation. So the premise of the first part is the conclusion of the Mule plotline, and then what happens is the removing of the Mule as a problem, because I can't really tell you what happens to the Mule without making it. I mean, like, but the avoiding of the removing the danger of the Mule from the Foundation timeline alerts the first Foundation of how powerful the second Foundation must be, because they do the unthinkable. And so the first Foundation goes, whoa, that's a crazy thing for anybody. What's going on? We need to know. We need to know how there is this other group of us that we don't know about, who are they're powerful in a way that we can't imagine, like what's going on. So that's the second half of the book. And here's the thing is, like, yeah, it becomes this kind of snake swallowing its own tail, and Asimov is brilliant for that. So, yeah, that's the thing, is it becomes this, years later, the Mule searching for, and like how the Mule problem is dealt with, and then what that says about a second Foundation. Okay. So. The Mule said, since I felt it necessary to trace Chanis, it was obvious I expected to gain something thereby. Since he went to the second Foundation with a startling speed and directness, we can reasonably assume that was what I was expecting to happen. Since I did not gain the knowledge from him directly, something must have been preventing me. Those are the facts. Chanis, of course, knows the answer. So do I. Do you see it, Pritchard? And Pritchard said doggedly, no, sir. And I'll explain. Only one kind of man can know the location of the second Foundation and prevent me from learning it, Chanis. Chanis, I'm afraid, you're not actually a traitor. You are, rather, a second Foundationer. And Chanis' elbows rested on his knees as he leaned forward, and through stiff and angry lips said, what is your direct evidence? Deduction has proven wrong twice today. There is direct evidence too, Chanis. It was easy enough. I told you that my men have been tampered with. The tamperer must have been, obviously, someone who was A, unconverted, and B, fairly close to the center of things. The field was large, but not entirely unlimited. You were too successful, Chanis. People like you too much. You get along too well, I wondered. And then I summoned you to take over this expedition. I didn't set you back. I watched your emotions. It didn't bother you. You overplayed the confidence there, Channis. No man of real confidence could have avoided the dash of uncertainty to a job like that. Since your mind did avoid it, it was either a foolish one or a controlled one. So it becomes like that, right? And by the way, that seems like I just read you this huge but consequential piece of the story. Me? Like... yeah, the mule is using his psychic powers to try to figure out who the people of the Second Foundation are and where the Second Foundation is. And there becomes this thing about, like, the Foundation's being founded at both edges of the galaxy. And then, so they start looking at the geometrically opposite edge of the galaxy for the Second Foundation. And then it becomes weird about, like, what the nature of the Second Foundation is and, like, how it fits in to, like, the First Foundation, because they're clearly not the same. And they clearly have these separate functions. And then, like, yeah, and the mule is searching, and it... So, here's the thing, is that, like, this original trilogy is super worth a read, right? Super good. It's, like, absolutely amazing stuff about, like, the idea that these people are kind of struggling alone in the dark, right? That, like, the future is a mystery to all of us, but for these people, they have ideas about the future and are trying to, you know, you can never know if your actions in the present will give you the desired outcome in the future. You can't know that. Like, you can't. And Asimov plays that up really well in these novels. He plays up a lot of other things, too, like this kind of idea of, like, reading people's minds and psychic warfare, and this kind of, like, and the ideas of, you know, the way people can manipulate other people, and then what that does to this, the ideas of this plan that is, theoretically, it's like a social science, it's like a super future social science. So good. It's so good. And then the idea of, like, how a galactic civilization looks, like the planet Trantor, which was the center of the galactic civilization, has no dirt shown on it, right? It's completely covered in buildings. It's an absolute technological city. Like, it's one giant technological city. Like, billions, trillions of people. And, you know, at this point, we get to points in the novel where people are pulling that stuff up to try to get back down to the dirt because the Empire's fallen apart. And how the Dark Ages after Galactic Empire looks, Asimov's a genius, right? I mean, we all know that what Asimov did really well was write science fiction books. It's what Asimov did really well. It makes him a name almost synonymous with science fiction. It's like you say to any guy on this, like, you pick any random person and you say, and start naming science fiction writers, like, you're not going to find a lot that when you're like, oh, Connie Willis, they're like, oh, I know Connie Willis, she wrote the Oxford Time Traveling series. But, like, you mention Arthur C. Clarke or Isaac Asimov, and people are going to be like, oh, yeah. Like, in Isaac Asimov, they won't even know what he wrote. They'll just be like, oh, I've heard of him. Whereas Arthur C. Clarke, they'll be like 2001. But, you know, that's why Asimov is. He was a prolific, consistent, good writer. And, yeah, you should read the original Foundation trilogy. It's amazing. It is so good. It's such a good set of 3 books. And you should check that out. Now, unfortunately, what we have to do is we have to move on in this series because there's 4 more books, but we're only going to deal with 2. So when we come back, Foundation's Edge will be our next book, and it is the Hugo Award winner from '83. And I'll see you guys for that. Bye, everybody.